My friend Jane Rosen gave me a book once called Subversive Ceramics. And I looked at the cover and I went, oh, I'm a subversive artist. I've always been political, but I've always kind of thought of myself as a messenger, that there should be some kind of communication in my work. A lot of it is definitely has a message in it, something I'm trying to say, some injustice I'm trying to point a finger at. Canary in a coal mine. I guess early on, that's what I wrapped my identity around, as being an artist. My father would get Time magazine or any kind of magazine, and I would always go right to the art page, or visual art page. I couldn't wait to get to that page. When I was around 12, my mother, I guess, showed some foresight. It wasn't anything I sought out, or maybe I did. Maybe I came across it. I don't remember, but there was this shopping mall, and kind of on the side was somebody had rented, an artist had rented out one of the storefronts and was teaching painting classes, basically for kids. And my mother enrolled me, and I can show you some of those images. All those early 1969-ish time was all out of that student mall painting class. And I was just kind of painting other paintings that were in the studio, and I was fascinated by seascapes, and so they're there to show you the very early attempts, in which elements of those pieces I find very beautiful. The self-portrait oil on canvas for me, was a duty. An artist should do a self-portrait at varying times in their career. I haven't done a lot of self-portraits, but I just felt that I should do one, and that's what that one is. And then I made the frame. My Maxfield Parrish Girl is the title of the watercolor, and it's a self-portrait. And it was during my infatuation with David Bowie and all that androgyny stuff. Halloween, I got dressed up as a Japanese kabuki girl. And then I got home, and I guess it's my tradition is to get home and to take the wig off and to do some self-portraiture. And I think it's one of the most successful photographs I've ever taken and printed. I printed it myself. The calligraphy series, I've always been fascinated with Oriental, particularly Japanese calligraphy. And although I don't know Japanese, I don't know Chinese, the images of the characters are just fascinating to me. And so I mimic them. At one point I would just have a pad of paper and a brush and black ink on the table, and every day I'd walk up and I'd do a few quick, faux Oriental, just to keep the jeu going, whatever you call it. I was doing Joni Mitchell's hair at the time, that I did a portrait of her. And again, it was taken out of one of the album covers. I think it was The Hissing of Summer Lawns. You open it and she's floating in a pool on her back. And it just was, again, this was something that wasn't premeditated. It was just, doing the Japanese brushwork every morning facilitated my ability to do that portrait, because I was allowed to kind of step out of myself, get out of my own way, and allow it to come through. Painting Hawaii was also inspired by Keith Haring. Its line and color And I liked playing with the transparency of acrylic paint and line. Singing in my sleep is an homage to the dreams that I've had where I'm singing. And I wanted to be a singer when I was really young. When I was in first grade, I had heard that they were having, singing. They had a singing thing, but it started at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I'm not gonna do that. But I have sung, I have a little bit of a gift, but I never developed it. In My Father's Shadow is an oil painting. I came across a photograph on the cover of Los Angeles Times that just, inspired me. And it's a photograph of a mother and a father and their son collecting sardines on the sand of Bombay Bay. And it was just one of those windows that opened and I went for it. And I look at it now and I go, I don't know if I could ever do that again, or I don't know how I did that. Sometimes the door opens and you walk through and then you do it and you find yourself on the other side of it and you're like, what was that? That's a portrait of a friend of mine, Paul Lowy. I finished it and I showed it to him and I said, do you want to buy it? And he said, no. So I still have it. Back in the day, Eddie Murphy, I think it was arrested for picking up a transsexual sex worker. And so that's what inspired the painting Sunset Tranny. Abstract Child, Purple, Yellow, Black is more of the calligraphy series. I had a friend at the time, a fellow artist, Alex Alferov, and I was over at his studio. He had a piece of paper on the table that had purple and yellow and black on it. I said, can I paint on this? He said, sure. So I just picked up the brush and I did ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. My, Japanese calligraphy practice was, my chops were up. And he was so inspired by it that he took a piece of paper and did a monoprint of it. Accidental art is a category of my work that some of it I am responsible for and some of it I just found. For example, the shingle. I was walking to the gym one day and the apartment building I was walking next to had given up one of its shake shingles. And I just looked at it and I went, wow. And I went to the gym and I thought about it and I thought, I gotta get that. I gotta get that on the way back, and I got it and brought it home and hung it on the wall. I made a series of phallic pots, but this one slumped over in the kiln. One of the aspects of ceramics is you never know what's going to happen in the kiln at 2400 degrees. So happy accidents sometimes happen. I had a piece of painted metal cloth that needed throwing out, so I folded it up with the intention of throwing it away. Then I stopped and looked at it and said, that's not trash, that's art. I'll tell you a story. My mother lost sight of me when I was 3. And she finally found me down at the end of the street sitting on the sidewalk watching a construction site. Now, whether it was the construction workers I was interested in or what it was they were doing, I think the latter. Really 3D building, constructing was the direction for me, and I haven't really gone back to painting since. In high school, I was doing, I was taking ceramics, and I had entered one of my pieces in a competition in high school. One afternoon, my friend David and I decided to walk off campus and go get high. We were sitting on the corner of a residential street, just as bold as you could be, smoking grass. And over the small hill comes flying this police car and stops in front of us, and the doors fly open and the guns are and we're like, oh my God. I had this pipe in my hand, you know. I was like, well, it's too late to throw this away. Anyway, so I got arrested. My mother was laughing. She knew this was going to happen. So I come to school the next day to find out that I had won first prize in this competition. Stop It. I spent a whole summer working on this piece at Santa Monica College. The scene inside Stop It is a iconic scene of nature. Trees, mountains, there's an eagle, some rocks, and then there's a stop sign. It says Stop It. And you know, this is another subversive piece of ceramic. Gyre was also a part of the Santa Monica College experience, and it came after Stop It. I became aware at the time I was making this piece, I became aware of the great Pacific garbage patch. And they referred to them as gyres because they just sit in the middle of the ocean and they're huge and they just float out there and spin. So I thought, well, okay, this thing was turning out to look like some sort of a womb. And I thought, well, I'll go to the beach and I'll collect a bunch of plastic off the beach and fill it with the plastic on the beach. And there was going to be a show, and it was in a show, and the people who were emceeing the show didn't quite know how to talk about it because it's clearly a huge vagina. But it's a commentary on how the ocean is our origin. We crawled out of the ocean. It's the womb of mankind, and it's full of plastic. Semic writing was founded sometime in the early 90s. I discovered its existence on a formal, in a formal way at an art show that I went to about a year ago. I didn't know Semic writing as an art form existed. Semic writing is mimic writing. It's not literal. It's the same thing I was doing with the Oriental calligraphy. And in the pot, the ceramic pot that I made in '73 in high school, I did a Semic writing on it before it existed. I like to sometimes just do some things fast and furious. And there's a piece also that was in the, that doesn't exist anymore. It was temporary. Urs Fischer show downtown. Urs Fischer is a Dada artist, and he took over the entire David Geffen space for the Museum of Contemporary Art downtown, and he also took over the main gallery too. But in the David Geffen space, he ordered, I don't know how many tons of this gray low fire clay. And they sent the word out, anybody that wanted to come down and make something could. And I spent every possible moment going down there and creating the piece that I created, which has, I don't even know if it has a title. So this is what was salvaged from my Urs Fischer experience. Out of all the clay, I asked him if I could keep this because everything that was created was recycled. And I was able to keep this piece here. It wants to become something else, but it hasn't happened yet. So it's just hanging out for better days. I created that, and then I did one of these quick statuesque abstract pieces. So those are just fun. Again, not too much meditation, just going at it, and seeing what comes. Africa. A lot of times my pieces seem to be premeditated by something else that I'm not conscious of. And I started Africa before I went to Africa. And then when I finished it, it was clearly African. I had made this plaster press mold of a baby doll's face. And I was pressing pieces of porcelain into it, and I made this vase. And it's all these little baby faces. And then I just came up with the title, All Babies Go to Heaven. Illustrator Baby is a ceramic foundation, but over the foundation I did epoxy and resin and pieces of colored paper, and then colored resin pools. Halloween Lantern number 2 was another fun kind of just going at it kind of a thing. Porcelain. Once I get into something, when I just stick with it and I just stay with it until it's done, and that piece came out really good. I have a plate in my head. So that started out with just a head sculpture. I was just doing a translucent porcelain head. I got the idea of creating a plate and then slicing off the back of his head and installing a plate. Mother Leaf is another kind of subversive piece. If you look closely at her, she has a vagina. She's a spirit. She's a forest spirit. Mother Teapot. I finished it, and my mother had died just as I was finishing it. And in her belongings, there was this little red crystal heart. I put it on the crown and called it Mother. Mother Teapot. I'm not a purist ceramist. I don't mind bringing other things in, and she's predominantly ceramic. But the earrings are called uflani. They're African. The beads I brought back from Africa. And she's also another serene spirit. She's very peaceful. And she's having some tea. Sumo is in the collection of the Cam Teapot Foundation in North Carolina. The teapot is porcelain. He's stealth because the stealth aircraft all have flat planes. Flat planes as in flat, as in not round, like a jet that has round surfaces. Radar can see it. If something is flat, like the stealth fighter jets, or it's all flat planes, radar can't see it. For a technical reason, I don't know why. So this teapot cannot be detected by radar. I had some leftover white porcelain, and I don't know why I started creating this man, and I thought, well, I'm gonna make the devil. So I made this devil in white porcelain, and and he was pretty successful. I just kept thinking about him, and I remember once I was listening to a talk on racism, and the person said, just go look at the dictionary and look at the word black and the word white. And the word black is predominantly pejorative, and the word white is predominantly positive. And that just astounded me. I had this white devil that I created, and I just kept thinking, what am I going to do with that? During this exploration of looking for a figure to stand opposite White Devil, I thought of the Asian deity Kuan Yin, who's had many adaptations through the centuries. When I first met her, she was portrayed in white porcelain. And again, this is when my subversive nature came into play. So having given white to the devil, I gave black to the Asian deity of benevolence. And it's just loaded with metaphor. Kuan Yin came 7 years after White Devil. That's how long it took for me, A, to get to it, and B, I had thought of it. I had created the idea in my head of Black Kuan Yin 3-4 years, or 2 years after White Devil. But again, it takes time for it to just state in my head as to what I'm going to actually do and how Black Kuan Yin is going to look. Most artists are trained to put it on paper first, to draw it out. I do it all up here. I'm always thinking about what I'm going to do next. Rarely will I write anything down. Sometimes it requires that, but for the most part, and it's usually when I go to bed and I'm lying there falling asleep, I'll go through it in my head over and over again what I'm going to do, and it pretty much develops in my head. And then I go and attack it. And it starts out with that idea, but quite often will go in a completely different direction and end up being something not originally thought of. So originally, Kuan Yin, her hand was open and outreached. And there's a Leonard Cohen line, "I will help you if I can, I will kill you if I must." And her other hand was behind her back and was going to hold a stick. But I thought it's not necessary, and it's too insightful, and I don't want to go in that direction. So it's just her hand on her left hand on her hip, and her right hand was open, and then I thought, well, that's not working for me. And so I put her hand like this, as if to stay, and it all became clear to me, enough, stop. And it turns out that Black Kuan Yin in scale is 2 to 3 times larger than White Devil, which is another unforeseen metaphor that came along. I had to learn to persevere. I had to learn not to give up when I came up against, difficulty or what I perceived to be as failure. I had to be willing to, like with Kuan Yin, I was cutting her arms off, and I was cutting her breasts off, and I was cutting her face off and putting it back together. So until the vision is satisfied, I have to be willing to go through whatever needs to be done to get it there. So, that's, I guess, the discipline I was talking about, is to stay with it and not give up. She comes across to me as very successful, and just, she has a confidence in her face and a serenity that is undeniable. And I would love for her to be an ambassador sculpture of some kind, 30 feet tall in bronze. There's 4 abstract bronzes. They're composed of pieces of Mexican fan palm trees that grow along Hollywood Boulevard out here. The seed husks, the bark, and they're just, lying in the gutter. They fascinated me, so I would pick them up and dip them in wax to make them easier to work with, and then I would make these compositions. Anything that will burn out. You refer to the process of lost wax. Anything that will burn out in the kiln before you pour in the bronze, you can use. Bronze number 1, that piece, it's very Japanese. I'm very influenced by the Japanese aesthetic. It shows up a lot in my work. And that piece also could be interpreted as geisha. Again, it's just play with organic materials. There's a little curlicue in there that kind of started it. It's kind of hanging down. And I think that the rest of it was eucalyptus bark. Abstract number 4, bronze, also known as Wind in the Tree, was a departure from just composition of shapes. The first two bronze pieces were cast solely in one piece. There was not a lot of after welding. This number 4 was elements that I then finished here at the studio as opposed to at school at El Camino, and just kept working with different pieces and composing that together by welding elements. The dancer came, he's eucalyptus bark, and he started out with a piece of cardboard. It was a strip of cardboard, and the end of it had kind of like these matchbook mangled fingers. And it just fascinated me, that arm. So I dipped that in wax, and that's what started that sculpture. I'm not Catholic, but I had heard of this phrase, the Immaculate Heart. I never knew what it meant. So in my mind, I just created my own narrative. It's based on that narrative. I still don't know what the formal narrative for the Immaculate Heart is. I have an idea. But again, it's a subversive message, my piece. So this is Immaculate Heart. I've been working on this piece for 20 years. Lots of different directions, lots of delays. It's composed of ceramic. This looks like bronze, but it's not. It's ceramic. This is ceramic. This is ceramic. This is bronze. This is bronze. So this is the Immaculate Heart, made out of porcelain. And it'll reside inside of this chamber, and you'll look through here to see it. And originally it was going to hang from, this was going to be the hanging, this was going to attach to this, and that was all going to sit in here. But that plan has all gone a different direction. This is no longer, these will be cut. And then from here, this will still sit in here, but beneath here will be a cradle of steel, bronze, and ceramic. It'll sit on a tabletop or a pedestal. It's not going to hang anymore, but hopefully another year, and it'll be done. What's important to me that my work is strong enough that anybody who comes across it and looks at it has some kind of reaction to it. Some visceral, important, cathartic, that there's something there to be triggered. That's more important than anything. Because that, I think, is the sign of a good piece of work.